Will there ever be a right time to reopen schools? The fate of schools around the world has been hanging in the balance since the start of the pandemic. The World Bank estimates that around 1.57 billion children and youth have been affected by school closures, making up 90% of the world's student population. Governments were quick to order the closures of schools to prevent the spread of the novel coronavirus, but it's taking a bit longer to reopen them. Data from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, shows that only 65 countries plan to fully or partially reopen their schools. The main issue is one of health and safety versus education and the reopening of the economy. In terms of transmission, advocates of reopening schools argue that children don't commonly develop severe symptoms of COVID-19. In Scandinavian countries such as Norway, Iceland, and Sweden, transmission of the virus in schools hasn't been much of a concern. In fact, Iceland and Sweden kept their primary schools open throughout the pandemic. Iran, Germany, Italy, China, Hong Kong, South Korea, the US, the UK, and other countries chose to shut down schools at the peak of the pandemic, but many have already reopened or are planning to reopen schools soon. In an editorial, British daily newspaper The Guardian spoke out against the bullying of teachers to reopen primary schools. They ask, is it safe for a teacher or pupil living with a vulnerable relative to go back to school? Can the testing system that failed to protect care home residents now be trusted? While children and women are less likely to develop serious symptoms of COVID-19 and the successful reopening of schools in Denmark is encouraging, the paper argues that it isn't enough to prove that all 17,000 English primary schools will be safe. After all, other hard-hit countries such as Italy and Spain have closed their schools until September. On the other hand, Andrew Jack of the Financial Times writes, allowing parents to return to work is key to revive economies that have ground to a halt. Calypso Chalkidu, the Director of Global Health Policy at the Center for Global Development, says that reopening primary schools will allow parents to restart the economy. Mark Pettinghill of the Royal Gazette proposed a hybrid approach that would allow people who can work from home can continue doing so with their children at home too, while other parents can have their children go to school. In the end, the governments have the final say, and we must be prepared for whatever they decide. Rukmini Banerjee of Hindustan Times emphasized the need to foster communication among parents and children and help children reconnect once schools reopen. Andrew J. Tobias of Cleveland.com also recommended that states like Ohio learn from Asian countries that have reopened schools but with temperature checks, desk dividers, shoe disinfectants, and limited class sizes. It doesn't have to be a trade-off between safety and the economy if we prepare for what's to come. Are you in favor of reopening schools in your country? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below.
Yeah.